if you're listening to this, you're probably connected to Guy or myself in some way, shape, or form in real life or on social. But we run an agency called Custom Influence, and we do B2B influencer marketing. And we wanted to sit down in a good spot and kind of do a brain dump on the state of the influencer marketing space for B2Bs right now. Want to talk a little bit about what we've seen change this year. We've been obviously following everything nonstop and working on projects constantly, so can share a lot of learnings. And we want to also really go deep, because we haven't done this before, on just how to apply influencer marketing to existing marketing channels. So giving a bit of advice for B2B marketers, actual practical advice, and yeah, covering off who's doing it well, what sectors, what specific companies. And so yeah, thanks for listening in. Guy, how are you feeling? How are you doing?
It's been a long year, hasn't it?
I know it has been a
It's
long
been a
year.
long year in influencer marketing world, but a really good one, and one that gives me a lot of hope that 2025 is going to really be a year where this space sees a lot of growth and grows up a bit. It feels like, if we think about not this year but last year, and we were having conversations with clients, brands, agencies, just felt a very immature status, particularly from a UK EMEA perspective, with minimal standardization within a marketing sector. If you compare it to other channels, it just feels so different. But almost that's where the exciting part of it is, because it feels very authentic, very organic, um, and big opportunities for brands to partner with people who have authority, experience, independence in a space, and particularly in a space, if we think about the spaces we operate in, which is technology business, and purely B2B. Um, it feels like a lot of those marketing channels that, say, I would have bought in the decades that I've been, sadly, uh, within marketing media, um, that those channels have kind of, there may be a bit of a tipping point. They kind of need a bit of a reboot. They kind of need something to almost get them going again, especially from spaces like the publisher space, and things like lead generation and even event marketing. Event marketing obviously had a massive hit in COVID. That seems to have bounced back massively. Brands really want to, especially tech brands, want to leverage events as much as possible, like they always used to, because they know how great they are at, delivering face-to-face engagement. And whether that be from a digital perspective or whether that be, live in real life. So I think there's lots of interesting ways that we've seen, which we will go into, um, which we've seen actually when you apply some of the influencer tactics, strategies, personas, the people, to these areas, it can really make a massive difference. And I think that's the interesting thing that we've learned this year and are continuing to learn, but also that we know that we can apply that next year on a bigger scale with other brands, and we've kind of got the experience to know how to make that as seamless as possible. Because going back to the non-standardization of this space, it isn't a kind of, right, I pick the phone up or I make an email or I send an email and then that gets processed and that's done. There's a lot of
There's so
back.
much back and forth.
Yeah.
And you know what I've been thinking about, particularly this week, because Guy and I are both from a paid and more recently programmatic media buying background, where we spent time at previous businesses and also worked together. But what I was thinking this week is that influencer and creator marketing is pretty much the opposite of programmatic in terms of the process involved with it. I mean, I know when we used to sit down and run programmatic campaigns and plan them, um, there is a lot of emphasis on data. There's a lot of emphasis on automation, on optimization once things are running. And you can still do look at those things with influencer and creator marketing, but humans are really at the center of it, and there's no getting around that, which now I think is what makes it so effective and so powerful, and definitely something brands should be doing. But it can't be looked at in the same way as, set it, forget it. And I think the use of influencers and creators and thought leaders can transform a lot of existing channels, as did like kind of, the wave of automated or biddable media buying like 10, 12, 15 years ago. But this kind of transformation, and how, working with individuals can kind of transform, media channels now, it looks different, right? And it's planned differently. And I think we've learned how to run the agency differently based on that. It's been a huge learning curve around how to really get things off the ground and get things done. But it's a lot more exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think one thing, when if you're not comparing it to programmatic or to display or to media buys, etc. But I think when, say, we went through the journey of working together in the programmatic space, I think at the outset when I set the company up, it was like, not only will this bring in, like, the data will be key, but there was the promise of things being a lot more creative, being able to almost be different and have lots of different iterations of a message and be able to speak to an audience in different ways. And all I saw really is that not happen. Yeah. If I'm honest, yeah. It was kind of like, okay, we've got all these opportunities to do this, use the technology in the right way.
Personalization.
But it kind of just kept boiling itself down to a brand message, a logo, a call to action, and that's it. And you might have a couple of different variants. And that was that. And
it was more based on like efficient. It ended up being more based on efficiency and automation than personalization and creativity.
Or telling any sort of story. Yeah. It was like, I agree. Here's my brand. Here's my call to action.
How can I get it to the right people?
Thank you very much. Yeah. And how can I utilize the data and the tech to get me there? and it kind of just didn't. That's kind of where it stopped. That's where it started and ended. Where I think what we're seeing now is the ability for brands to truly create on top of content that already exists. So they've got their marketing content, they've got their, whether it's white paper collateral, digital assets, websites, video content, whether that be using internal speakers, advocates, using thought leaders, etc. But the ability to then take that content and then apply it to a third party, which you're kind of doing when you're using other media channels anyway. You're saying, right, okay, let's say you're working with a publisher, you want to reach that publisher's audience. Or if you're using a programmatic channel, it's like, right, the data that sits within that programmatic channel, that's who I want to speak to. With a creator's audience, you can actually speak to their audience, but leveraging all of the recommendation, all of the validation that sits within that audience that is applied to that person who is essentially at the head of that community. And a lot of the people we work with are now, they've kind of grown up over the last 2-3 years in terms of, yes, they might have come out of a career, well respected in their space, and then they're seen as a thought leader, but they've developed almost into a full-blown content creator. So they're utilizing a lot of video creative, they're doing a lot of long form, short form writing as well as video, but it gives the opportunity for that brand to partner with that person and then create something almost brand new or unique to that person's channel in their tone of voice. And that's the kind of interesting bit for me, because it can potentially deliver on the promise of other media channels of being able to genuinely speak to an audience with a message and almost a creative offering, and not logos and images, but actually something that is fully created off the back of someone who is at the head of that community.
Yeah, I think it's about, in B2B in particular, this isn't about outsourcing content marketing. It's about repurposing and getting more creative with content with people that can do it differently than you do it as a brand. And we've seen some really great instances of that. I think, the reinvention of a white paper, for example, white papers and research are put out by most, B2B brands, whether it's quarterly, whether they just do an annual thing. But having that piece of content, explored by somebody who's influential or a thought leader in that industry, and then analyzed and shared out potentially as a video piece, a podcast, a LinkedIn Live, whether, so short form video, long form video. It just gives a little bit longer shelf life to content, which is a huge opportunity for B2B brands because they know how long it can take to produce that content, right?
I think it humanises it as well, because the buying groups have got so used to I'm in research phase, so therefore I'm going to look for recommendation. I'm going to look for analyst papers. I'm going to look for research papers. I'm going to look for any documentation that is going to help me make a decision, and whether that is white papers, ebooks, etc., that have been in market for decades. It's now about how can I stand out? How can I utilize the content that we make on a quarterly basis, or sometimes even more frequent on potentially a monthly basis, and actually put that into market in an interesting way, and one that is going to get attention, but also have an association to quality.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where these influential voices sit. It's in the space where they can add.
They can cut through the noise as well.
Through, yeah.
Because everything is more social first now. Again, probably when I started my career, there was a few blogs in particular, me as let's say a B2B buyer or B2B decision maker, there's a few blogs that you'd go to, you'd read, industry trade pass, you'd be on that every day. But I think that has really changed now. Obviously, I'm going to be a bit biased because I'm living and breathing on LinkedIn and on YouTube and on Substack. But I think as a broader generalization, that's true to even the most senior people, the most senior executives across industries. Everything is just more social first now, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. And brands again, they know that, but you've got to meet audiences where they are, and they're on places like LinkedIn. And so, working with creators or independent voices just gives that good opportunity to do that. Another, theme around content marketing, because we're talking about, how do you apply or how do you work with influential people if you're a B2B brand? If a brand, say you don't have content or you're not doing a certain thing that you'd like to do, the common use case or thing that comes to mind is podcasts. So, not every B2B brand needs to launch a podcast, but I think if those B2B brands really think about why they're doing that, they want content and engagement, and they want to, story tell. Working with industry voices that potentially already have a podcast or already can do video can kind of fill in the gaps in a B2B brand's content marketing strategy, potentially, in a more cost-effective way, with less time and human resource involved. And that can be really powerful as well. So again, in this kind of like looking at a content marketing strategy and how do influencers fit in, don't just think about repurposing existing content, but also think about where an influencer partnership or a creator partnership can add to things can add or fill in the blanks for things you're not doing and want to do.
Yeah, it's like net new content, but
Yeah.
also net new exposure to audiences. So as opposed to constantly talking to the audience potentially you've built up that is your own audience, working with other thought leaders, etc., or people within your sector who have got podcasts, video channels, and audiences already baked into that. The exposure you get by being part of that conversation is great because it's all new, it's all upside, as opposed to just constantly utilizing your own audience or working your own audience with your own content, which has its place 100%.
This is about new
But it's about
opportunities.
It's about creating new opportunities and actually, widening your net. I think also coming back to the event piece, and I think if we talk about some of the things that we've learnt this year and things that we think that are going to be, big next year, I think it's around that, application of influence, to different areas. So if we want to talk about, say, event marketing as an application of, that feels like a space where, traditionally from a B2B point of view, that's where the action is. That's where, if you think of all the big vendors, they have such huge events, shutting down cities for people to attend, their conference, they're a huge deal because it means that they can get all of their customers and potential customers all in one place, showcase exactly what they're doing right now, but also in the next 6, 12, 18 months to get people excited about what they're doing, what they're bringing to market. And I think having an application where you have people in your space, attending that event, giving focus to it, creating content,
and sharing it on social,
being part of the package, we've seen has worked really well. Do you want, we activated something recently which would be interesting to talk about.
We've done a few different event partnerships this year, and the more recent one was HubSpot. And again, it was their own event, but you could do this with events that you're just sponsoring and attending, or sponsoring or attending as well. It doesn't have to be your own event. But with HubSpot, they were running a conference. It was London based, and they wanted to, extend the coverage that they had at the event, and the announcements that they made on social. So we worked with 3 different, let's call them content creators / industry voices, to post that they were attending, live post while they were there, create content, do interviews. We had video content, podcasts, a couple write-ups. And then all of that went out, during and post the event to, drive that buzz a little bit further, drive the FOMO, right? That's what you're trying to do. And I think in 2024, going into 2025 for B2B brands, it's not enough just to do the event, have the event. You've got to create content and make it memorable. And what better way to do that than with work with people that can attend, are interested, and can do that for you. So that was the HubSpot event. But we've also done a couple other ones. We've done virtual events, so driving signups to attend a webinar is another, kind of concept that can be used. So it's not just limited to, in real life content creators. Gosh, now I'm just thinking of more and more examples we've done this year with events. There's so much opportunity there.
I think it feels like, and I think HubSpot recognise this, it's like if you're going to invest that level of budget into a event,
You want it to be worth it.
it's like make the most out of it. It's kind of like, right, how can you elongate the content that is being created on the day. How do you then get that to reach people that weren't at the event who would maybe have liked to have been there? I mean, it sold out really quickly.
Yeah.
So you've got lots of people that would be like, oh great, I really wanted to go to that, but I can't. But they're connected with the different people we had as part of the event from an influencer perspective, crossing different areas. So they were covering off customer experience, they were covering off go-to-market sales, marketing was the other one, was it?
Well, yeah, it was
Kind of.
go-to-market,
Yeah,
sales, customer experience. But yeah, you've kind of got a person from each of those
each
areas.
camp, yeah.
And then you've got the content and the coverage, each from a unique angle, different formats. It is a lot to manage. But again, it's going back to, if you're going to make that investment into events are a lot of work. Anybody in a B2B brand will know that. If you're going to do it, you really want to maximize the coverage and engagement you have with attendees, and equally people that wanted to attend but didn't, out of that.
We had a funny side note actually from the HubSpot event. One of the influencers that we worked with, I followed up with him the week after and said, look, how was it? We this was probably one of the biggest events we've worked on with influencers. It'd be great to understand feedback, so we can just make things as good as possible, next time round, improve, etc. He gives some really solid feedback around it, which was great. But the interesting side piece was that he talked about the difference between working with brands on let's say digital assets and brand versus event marketing. And his feedback around it was really interesting, because he said that the amount of messages he got prior to the event were so almost like double, treble than what he would normally get around a usual collaboration. But it kind of changed his perception on how his audience were viewing him when there was an opportunity to meet in real life, to the point of where he was being asked to meet for a selfie. And if we were having this conversation 2 years ago and I said to you, there's someone who talks all day about go-to-market and sales on LinkedIn, and yeah, he's got a good following, but he's going to be appearing somewhere later, and you can get a selfie. You'd be like, why? So that was really, really interesting for both of us actually, on the relationship between audience and influencer.
Yeah, or somebody who's leading in an industry.
Yeah, or someone who has a following on LinkedIn, because the expectation, I think, from let's say consumer world, is that almost, that's the thing. If you are a voice on Instagram, or someone who has built up a following, and you are doing a book launch or attending an event, etc., the expectation,
people want to see you.
They want to meet you. They want to, give you a hug. They want to say, I love you, love your work, etc., etc. And that's kind of a given. That's to be expected. And that's why these people sometimes turn up with security, because, there could be a problem. But yeah, gets out of hand. But to think that that's going to happen at a customer experience SaaS go-to-market event with senior decision makers attending, it was an expensive ticket. This wasn't a freebie. This was kind of, people have got to pay a decent amount to go to the event. But he was having people send him a LinkedIn message saying, oh, let me know what time you're going to get there. I'd love to get a selfie beforehand, which was wow. which I found really interesting. So I want to explore that a bit more with him. So there'll definitely be a follow up on that.
Yeah, I think when I reflect on what that means overall, I think again, it's just people, brands, maybe B2B brands have this expectation that everything is corporate, everything is serious, everything is process oriented, and people are just looking for knowledge and to make decisions. But actually, people like to be entertained when they're at work. They like to feel human, express emotion, and that that's testament to that, right? Is that even though it's your career or your role, um, you you can look to people for inspiration, motivation, like I said, entertainment.
Especially if they're doing the job or they've done the job that you've done as well, because
Exactly,
there's
it's
almost that.
relatable, you
it's
know.
it's relatable. It's slightly more.
And you spend so much time at work. Why
Yeah,
wouldn't you have people? I guess this is just kind of like the case for influencers in B2B anyway, but like, why wouldn't you look to certain individuals for advice, knowledge,
mm,
recommendation, um, in a space, in a job that you spend so much
yeah,
time doing? You know,
yeah.
you are consuming content related to your career, hopefully. I'm sure there's some people that aren't, but I think that
Hopefully,
the more senior,
hopefully.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, the more senior you are, the more it's going to be your career is a bigger part of your life. And
Yeah,
even for younger people too, right? Young people that are starting out in their career are just social native.
totally.
That's how they get
And if
information no
anything,
matter what it is.
they need the direction even more.
Exactly. I always think about that with younger people entering the workforce. Now, no matter what your career is, just how different it must be for them, because they are coming into probably a remote or hybrid work environment. There's nobody next to them all day long to quickly ask about something or check in with or get a recommendation for, just learn the ropes from. And that's where we're seeing a lot of business creators too come into the fold, where they're offering career advice, they're offering practical knowledge, for younger people to take advantage of, even in some cases completely retraining,
Or even things like when we work with Amber Shand,
yeah,
when she's looking at, her whole piece is about, um, giving people confidence around, career, their next career move, and allowing them to not feel like, they're pretending or there's an imposter syndrome piece going on. It's kind of, I can do this. I can go and get the right training. I can go and understand the right tools to develop my career. And I think that's really important, because actually, the as you said, the real social natives is that kind of age group, that 20 to 30.
yeah,
Um, because that's all they know.
exactly. And it's not going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's just that is just normal, standard. Everything needs to be social first. One area we haven't discussed that I did want to pick up is lead generation, and how influencers, creators can work on lead generation projects, and how we've done it, how we see it, because that is within B2B marketing. That is lead generation, demand generation, there's different words for, I guess, different things, and different companies will categorize it differently, but it's so important, right? Is that meeting between, marketing initiatives and what you're delivering onto a sales team. So I think I can kick off with kind of my view with how the two potentially can fit together. So in the lead generation space, we've looked at it, we've talked about it. There's, there's things like content syndication, right? Or there's, a lead magnet that's shared or promoted in any specific way. Again, it goes back to content, how that brand's developing it. But then the aim is you get that email, or you get that contact detail, or that signal off the back of it. That means it can be handed over to sales and followed up on. And so with lead generation, I think where influencers can start to get interesting, or where they can come in, is how can you put together some sort of partnership whereby that influencer, that voice, is either developing that lead magnet with you, or they're creating content that's hosted somewhere that traffic is being driven to. And I think that's a completely untapped opportunity that, can definitely be explored further with B2B brands going into next year, right? Is, what are you using for demand gen? What are you using to drive traffic, to get leads? And then is there a way to creatively, introduce influencers to help either make it more engaging, attractive, increase, click-through rate, or increase, brand recall, so that you can either speed that process up between awareness and when, that person becomes a lead or a signal to sales, or attract more people. I think, What are your thoughts on lead gen and where influencers can fit in?
I think going back to our first points, it's like that. It does feel like a one of the traditional B2B heartlands that could do with a reboot. Could do with a freshening up somewhat. And I think there is big potential for influencers to play a role in that process, mainly because if we think of, we all know this, the B2B sales cycle, there's always a research piece on it, isn't there? But it's coming in at around 11 to 12 months now for like a big ticket purchase, in whichever space that may be. Because we're in a fairly tight economy at the moment, people want to make the right decisions, so therefore they're not going to make knee-jerk decisions. So therefore it is, a long piece. But they also, within that decision-making stage, the buying groups want to be informed, and they want to kind of be recommended. They want to understand or feel comfortable that the choices that they want to make and the vendors they want to shortlist are ones that they should be doing, because they don't want to turn that 11-month buying cycle into a 18-month buying cycle or a 22-month buying cycle. So it's about, right, how do I kind of speed this up a bit? How do I make the right decision? And how do I do that in the knowledge that actually when we go to sign off, it's not going to backfire? So I think having influential voices aligned to the types of marketing campaigns that vendors want to put into market. So let's say there's an element, there's a demand gen piece where it's about, right, let's kind of get our brand into the right areas where the audiences are, and make us visible. Because again, there's research again all the time that comes out, but people generally make decisions and buy against brands that they have high awareness of. It's that safety net. It's like, right, okay, I understand them a bit more, I kind of get them, I know them. So having influencers talking about your brand, speaking to your exec team, co-creating content, working on research, all of this kind of activity just builds a case. and create digital real estate, particularly on whether it's the brand's own website, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's the influencers' socials, it's the influencers' video channel, whatever that looks like. When people are making a buying decision, when they go online and they start looking for you, or they don't know who you are and they come across you, there's that recommendation built in. There's the influencer saying to them that, you know, this brand should be part of your shortlist. So, you know, I think that's the kind of, there's a definite space for influencers to be part of that. But I think it's definitely totally untapped at the moment.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's about planning. It's I
about
think
long
with
term.
a lot of and a lot of B2B influence projects, it's about sitting back and thinking strategically on, okay, how and where and when does this make sense? Because I think if you're a marketer, just kind of saying, all right, we're going to run a B2B influencer campaign is probably the wrong way to think about it. It's okay, what are we doing in lead gen right now? And how do we apply it, and what can we measure off the, like, how can we set up a good test, and what can we measure? And I'm not talking about really overcomplicating things either, or trying to reinvent the wheel. It's about, you know, making it make sense, doing something new, but making it make sense to how you work BAU.
It's application, isn't it? It's like, right, okay, there's traditional B2B marketing models that have been in place for years, and whether that's event marketing, whether that's content marketing, whether that's lead generation, whether that's brand awareness, whatever that looks like. But then, right, how do we apply influencer marketing to it? How do we almost blend the old and the new? Yeah. How do we modernize? How do we actually get to a point where, like you said earlier, we are meeting the audience where they now are? You know, if they are no longer spending all their time on trade websites or technology websites, or, you know, some of the publishers I used to work for, if those, you know,
or they're
if
not
that's
even
not happening
Googling
anymore,
things anymore. People aren't even Googling things
Yeah.
anymore because they're using AI, or they're going in their LinkedIn feed, or whatever it is they're doing. As that behavior changes, so do the brands need to change. Cool. I feel like we've covered that, you know, those kind of different channels really well. I think what I'd like to get your view on now is just, what do you think has changed this year in particular with influencer marketing, based on the projects we've worked on and the space, and just being so consumed in it? What do you think are the bigger changes we're seeing right now? Do you want me to start?
No.
Okay.
I think what I've seen is definitely I would say from the summer, I would say the in particular LinkedIn, but also the trade press within marketing and media. There's just been so much more noise about this space, whereas the previous start of the year and the year before, minimal. You know, it was kind of us talking.
Me and you would be like, well, we found that, and this is good. It's a good signal. Yeah. But I think now it's like reached that point of critical mass where everyone's like, okay, it's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing, and it's now trying to, you know, work out how does this then move on? How does it grow up? And what I have seen, which has been really interesting this year, is, you know, part of our business is looking at authentic thought leadership style voices that are kind of in market, who have an audience but aren't commercializing that.
You know, they're just
piece.
doing their day job as whatever it is, whatever industry they're in.
They're doing their thing, and they've got a voice because guess what? They're senior, they're knowledgeable, they're senior, and and they have the ear of the audience they've built up, and they've kind of just done it by being brilliant,
Yeah.
as opposed to being, anything other than, just
Like taking a
knowledgeable.
course on how to become a content creator
Exactly.
in
So it's all
XYZ.
very organic. So when we've approached those types of people, um, it's been interesting that they've kind of, there is an awareness of like there is potential for them to be able to do something or to collaborate with a brand, where I think if we'd have had a conversation, well, we did it, if we had a conversation with people 2 years ago, it didn't get very far because they were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Whereas now there feels like a bit more awareness of that there's potential for me to work at my company,
Yeah.
or not, or I'm retired,
Or
or
I'm a
I've finished, or I'm a
consultant.
consultant, or I'm freelance, whatever. But I have the ability to content create, because if we think of some of the technology that, all the platforms that people can use for video, audio,
And
podcasting, etc.
distribution. Yeah, it's just there.
Distribution channels. You've got your LinkedIn platform. You've got, if you've built up a YouTube channel, if you've
Got a
built up
newsletter.
a newsletter, Substack, etc. So all of a sudden, there's the ability to almost go quite quickly to a micro publisher, which that's almost where the real, the real gold is. It's like they're the guys who have got the ear of the people within market, and it's totally organic, totally authentic, and that it's like, right, okay, how can I then speak to my audience on a different basis? How can I collaborate with brands that I genuinely I think are doing great work, and how can I work with them to then take that to my audience, to get them to, to upskill them, to educate them on what's going on in the market, and whether that be from a purely content point of view, whether that's interviewing the companies. We did a video series in Germany for one of our clients, where we had a one of the we had a CISO who is still working as a CISO, but has a fantastic LinkedIn audience, very senior audience, and he was started to get featured in Handelsblatt, which is one of the key business newspapers in Germany. And his profile was raising, and he came on our radar. We approached him and said, look, would you be interested in doing this video piece? It would go across a couple of months. You'd have to do, shoot 3 videos. We handled the production. And the client loved it, because it kind of made total sense that a guy who is, in market, doing all the practical elements of what that product and service was bringing to market, and be able to give a really balanced view, but then also allow and platform the the head the one of the head of the brand, at brand side, one of the head guys, to actually talk about what they're doing and how they're changing, how they're innovating. So that was really, quite a bit of an eye opener, a bit of a kind of, okay, we wouldn't have been able to do that the year before.
Yeah,
That just wouldn't have worked.
I think there's a couple things that you're getting at here, which is that people are more open to it because they, as a individual, right, as a creator, influencer, whatever you want to call it, most of them still hate that word, but they're more open to opportunities working directly with brands. I think that's clear. We've seen that. We know that now. Even if the partnership concept or the opportunity you're bringing to them, they didn't come up with, right?
Yeah.
That's the change, is that people are open to it, and they're open to new ways of partnering, compared to maybe what they did previously, which for many was just potentially the odd speaking engagement, right? So that's definitely happening.
Or potentially, if we roll it back a few more years, it would be like, right, I don't want this guy to speak to my head of innovation. I want Handelsblatt, the publisher that he was featured in, to speak to to speak to us, because, well, they're the publisher. They hold the keys to the kingdom. They've got the audience, etc., which undisputedly Handelsblatt have got a great audience. However, that there are now different routes to market, and social has started to democratize that a hell of a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what we've also seen, this is what I was going to say on big changes that we've seen this year, and obviously something that I'm very excited about, is that we're now seeing LinkedIn supporting creators and the creator economy on the platform so much more, right? I think last week, I've been meaning to do a post about this, but I haven't done it yet. Last week, LinkedIn kind of relaunched their LinkedIn creator offering. I think at the moment it's just a website, maybe with a course, but it's kind of LinkedIn holding their hands up saying, yep, we're all in on creators. That's a really good sign. We didn't see that last year. LinkedIn's obviously constantly making changes to the platform in all different ways, but from a creator perspective, it's really good to see that that's happening. And we're also seeing more and more creators overall on LinkedIn and elsewhere. That's part of our job as an agency, is to constantly build up this network and database of interesting, original voices in all different industries, from cybersecurity and marketing to more niche things like biotech or construction. I'm trying to think of some of the supply chain and logistics, all of these spaces. There are people talking, sharing constantly. You would be surprised. I think the average person would be surprised. But like we were saying before, people spend a lot of time at work and they're consuming and learning daily. And so it isn't really that surprising, when you really break it down. So yeah, LinkedIn being more supportive of creators, more creators overall, thought leaders open to, partnering directly with brands. Those are the big changes that I think we're seeing from a market perspective. Also, the nuance, we should probably mention the nuance between what an influencer is and what a content creator is and what a thought leader is and what a subject matter is. I think we're starting to firm up some definitions in the B2B space of who does what, or there's the broader term of thought leader, which has been around forever. It's not really specific to social content. That's fine. You can call these people thought leaders. Many of them are. There's people that are content creators, which I would associate with, they actually know how to create audio or video content or really engaging carousels on LinkedIn.
And they're doing that organically as well, not just for brands. It's kind of that's
exactly
their thing.
That's what that's what USP. They're doing. That they know how to create good content in whatever style or format that might be in. Then you've got influencers, just kind of a broad umbrella term, and maybe we use that term a bit too much, particularly for a lot of business people or professionals who don't want to be called an influencer, but you got to kind of call them something, right?
Start somewhere.
Yeah, you've got to start somewhere. So there's that term. Then there's the subject matter expert, who's just somebody who really knows their shit, but they're not necessarily always sharing that on social or creating great content. Every industry has subject matter experts that might help to produce content or get messages out there, but they're not necessarily sharing it, commercializing it, monetizing it. So there's that nuance there. But yeah, I think overall the language that is being used is changing constantly, and people are assigning definitions to it. And I'm sure that will continue to change, right? Lastly, I think this is not from a market perspective. What I've seen a big change in, at least from within custom influence, is that we actually know how to run things as efficiently as possible now. I think when you're a startup agency, and it's a new space that no one's ever done it before, prior to this year, it was a lot of, experimentation for everybody. Whereas now, I was having a conversation with a client yesterday. I feel really confident that there's nobody else that's going to do this faster, more efficiently, and tighter and more effective than we can, because we've looked at every single part of it, and we sit between the brand and the influencer and see it in its entirety and get both perspectives. And because of that, I think that's that process and putting a system around how to put an influencer campaign together really well has it's just complete. I think we've just
transformed.
We've completely transformed it this year, and I feel like we're in a really good place, which again makes me just feel really positive.
Good.
Anything else to add before we close up?
I think to close, I think the two is kind of what we've seen this year, but also looking ahead, I think there's two spaces that are really kind of they're applying influencers. Like quarter on quarter, we're seeing tech and professional services. I think they're the two at the moment that I see, kind of seeing the value or seeing the opportunity a bit more than others at the moment, particularly around things like cybersecurity, AI, anything where there's complexity that almost needs, although the service and offering is very technical and very digitally driven, you almost need a human being to present what it is, and how it works and how it can be applied and how someone should engage with it. And kind of similar to kind of professional services, that can be a really complicated, complex world with differing opportunities for clients to work with professional services brands. So again, it's kind of allowing a brand, and traditionally someone like a professional services, if I worked with a professional services brand on their very first digital campaign about 5-6 years ago, which sounds mad, but it was the first time they'd ever done anything online, and they were so conservative, it was ridiculous. It was like, so everything was buttoned down. It was quite tough to get it over the line, but once they did, they were like, wow, this is great. It won awards. It was a really great piece of work. So now we're now looking at working with that brand again, and it feels like they get the value that this space can bring. So it's almost like it's kind of we get it. Kind of we dipped our toe into digital a few years ago. We kind of get that. It had to have
been more than 6 years ago.
It wasn't. It genuinely wasn't. I don't think so. Seriously, it was ridiculous. It was like, I can't believe.
Everyone at their own pace, I suppose.
Exactly. So they were like, yeah, we've done that. We've completed digital. So now they're looking at influencer marketing, and the conversation is very different from how it was before, because I think they've done more digital, they've done more social. They kind of get that, the space is moving, the audience is moving to different areas, and influencers can play a part in their marketing, which 6 years ago it just wasn't the space, but now they're a lot more open to it. And I think brands, when they see other brands do it as well, they'll become more open to it as well, and they'll be like, right, okay, they're doing it, we should be doing it. Otherwise we're missing out on an opportunity.
As is with everything with marketing, they're doing it, we should be doing it. And you should be doing influencer marketing, but
don't go crazy.
Don't knee-jerk reaction, and try to shoot something out the gate that's not well thought out at all, because we see that as well. Cool. I think we've covered a lot, and I think we should do this more, maybe at the start of the year.
Quarterly, maybe.
Quarterly
content. Yeah,
I think with how busy things are, right? We're not going to probably get to something in a couple of weeks. The end of the year's in a couple of weeks, so yeah, let's sit down again. But I liked this, and it was good.
Good. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening.